Hola, welcome to our LinkedIn Live about the Diversity and Inclusion ISO-30415 standard and the Diversity and Inclusion Service Management DISM certification based on the ISO-30415 standard. Ana Maria, welcome. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thank you, Linda. My name is Ana Maria de Mesón Cornejo. My pronouns she, her, ella. We are here with Linda Espinosa Valencia. We are the co-founders of Ventura Collective. Thank you all for being here. Today, we will be speaking about two main topics. One, the ISO 30415 standard for diversity and inclusion, and the DISM, the Diversity and Inclusion Service Management Certification that we offer for EDI professionals in Canada in partnership with Inclusion Score and with the ISO 30415 Forum. So we'll just are going to talk a little bit about Ventura Collective. And before that, I'm going to be sharing our screen. All right. So we are an equity, diversity, and inclusion collective, consulting collective. We understand that the current systemic barriers need systemic solutions. And that's how we have been responding. We recognize that systemic change is vital in creating equitable workplaces for our communities and for ourselves, and we want to foster communal prosperity and well-being. We harness the collective joy, strength, inner and outer work of our collective power to sustain equity and work towards liberation. We are also members of the Standards Council of Canada, Linda and myself, and we work not only to promote the ISO standard 30415 globally, but also to develop it. And now we are honored really to be working with the Technical Committee 260 to also develop the technical standard following this 30415 standard. Linda, over to you.
Thank you, Ana Maria. Before we dive into the topics that we're going to talk today, we wanted to shed light on what is the state of DEI, EDI in organizations today. We see that it's reactionary. Usually a situation happens, a disgruntled employee is not happy, or racism. It's performative. That means that it just stays in our website or in PR statements. It's based on good intentions. It's not measurable. KPIs are not tied to anything related to EDI. There's no budget for it. And it's usually localized either in human resources or in a small EDI department in the organization. As well, it's focused only on diversity quotas. And what's wrong with that? Let's look at that.
Thank you, Linda. So would you like to continue?
Yes. When we're focusing only on diversity, some things can happen, which is neglect their redesign of systems and processes that can sustain the new talent, right? We bring new talent. Usually there's a mandate to say, like, there's this percentage of people that look like this, or they have these characteristics that need to join an organization, without the redesign of processes to support these people. We usually get tokenization of the new talent that joins our organization, and that can be extremely harmful for these communities, the people who belong to these communities. We leave the heavy lifting of teaching leaders and other employees how to make the new talent feel that they belong and that they're included. And we increase the possibility of high employee turnaround as the new talent don't feel included and that they truly belong in the organization. And of course, this increases the cost of attrition, retraining due to high turnaround.
Thank you, Linda. And what you are mentioning here and sharing with us really brings up to mind, for example, the federal initiative of the 50-30 Challenge, right? Which is a fantastic initiative that the federal government is supporting and absolutely needed in order to support such initiatives, which are clearly mandating a quota, right, of representation, 50% and 30%. Then what we need is, as Linda was mentioning, a support of these initiatives with policy, with internal policy, not only to go ahead and for the organization to hire, right, new talent that actually reflects society, but also to foster the continuation and the sustainability of such efforts on hiring.
And here we have a quote from Thomas Fioretti, which is the head of Zurich Resilience Solutions in North America. And he says, insufficient attention to diversity and inclusion has become a business risk. It can have a direct impact both on an organization's financial performance and its workforce. So it's not only about doing the right thing, but it's about protecting the organization as well, both financially and in order to retain top talent.
Thank you, Linda. So let's talk a little bit about who is the international standard organization ISO. So was founded in 1947. It is an independent, non-for-profit organization with more than 167 national standard bodies, with the Central Secretariat in Geneva, Switzerland. So the International Standard Organization develops standards in all industries. Mostly we know them for developing standards within healthcare, manufacturing, export and import of food products, security, data security, and more. And in 2018, they started developing human resources guidance standards, such as the standard 30415. And of course, in this work, the ISO provides solutions to global challenges. We want to point out that the insurance industry in Europe and in the US are already adopting diversity and inclusion ISO 30415 as the gold standard for corporate D&I. So for example, Lloyd's of London, Zurich, and AJ Gallagher are already underwriting insurance policies based on the ISO 30415. As we were mentioning in the previous slide, this standard, as all ISO standards, are developed with an international lens, and this particular one took over 10 years to develop. It is also important to point out that the ISO 30415 standard follows the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, specifically 3. Number 5, gender equality. Number 8, decent work and economic growth. Number 10, reduced inequality. And it's also guided by the principles of human rights at work by the International Labour Organization. As we see here in this slide, the ISO 30415 standard really sees the organization and applies EDI as a framework in the whole organization. So it covers areas such as governance, human resources, product and service development and delivery, and supply chain and other constituents. The standard applies to all sizes of organization, either for and non-for-profit, and it also applies to organizations of all industries. As we see in this slide, the standard does promote DEI prerequisites. That means that we have, as Linda mentioned in the previous slides, KPIs and really measurable tools to make the standard scalable and to truly sustain equity, diversity, and inclusion. It's also very clear on guiding organizations on the roles and the responsibilities that specific actions and measures need to be taken in order to support the standard, and recognizes that every organization is different and the needs are different and that the goals are going to be different also regarding EDI.
Ana Maria, as well, is very important to mention that the ISO recognizes that organizations are not silos and they live within communities, and it has a domino effect because one of the areas that the standard requires to apply EDI principles is the supply chain, which means supplier diversity, and as well requires organizations to request their suppliers to start working on equity, diversity, and inclusion. So this domino effect is extremely important and is what makes this standard very different from other frameworks.
Exactly, Linda. And you know what? It reminds me of what F.S. Henderson explained to us, that this standard is particularly revolutionary in a way because it actually takes into consideration, right, that part that you mentioned, supply chain, other constituents, and that product and service delivery and development. So this is a real game changer. Linda, can you tell us about the benefits for organizations that follow this international recognized standards, such as the 30415?
Yes, thank you, Ana Maria. And we took this information from the Standard Council of Canada, where Ana Maria and I are members. The Standard Council of Canada, it's the Canadian arm of the ISO. And they say, adopting international standards allow businesses to remain at the forefront of their industry, ensure products and services can be sold worldwide and shorten the business cycle, makes market access easier by reducing compliance costs and times, and proves that products and services meet current national and international standards. As well, as we see here, we have heard from many, many different well-known organizations about the research that the benefits of EDI applying a company-wide framework such as the ISO 30415 will bring to the organization, right? 35% more likely to outperform their competitors. That's from McKinsey. 70% more likely to capture new markets. That's from Harvard Business Review. 87% better at decision making from people management. And we can go on and on and on about all the research that shows that when you're intentionally applying a company-wide framework that includes roles and responsibilities, KPIs, budget, where the responsibility of EDI doesn't fall in just one person, but it's a democratization of this responsibility, the benefits are immense. But it's very, very important to know that this only happens when we are intentionally applying a framework that includes every single part of the organization.
Exactly, Linda. Like we say, right, this standard really helps organizations move from intentions to real actions. And as Linda was explaining, these benefits that we see are only possible if the EDI structure is soundly based on policies. So let's see now, what are the costs and risks of not implementing a standard such as the 30415? here we have US data, but it's relevant in the context of Canada. So for example, the employee turnover costs in companies in the States is more than 1 trillion per year. Also, in an organization that is 100-person average, 100 employee average, where the average salary is around 50,000, the cost of turnover could be between 660,000 to 2.6 million per year. So these costs are truly staggering. Why? Because we don't consider, right, usually the cost on retraining, finding the right talent or finding more talent. What about all the costs involved in turnover has now been calculated and presented in this slide. Also, as we saw already, it is a business risk, right? Not having an EDI sound structure is a business risk. We saw this quote, but wanted to bring it again because it's truly a risk that directly impacts both the organization, yes, financial performance, but also the workforce. And in 2023, the US Equal Employment Opportunity Commission reported that there were $664 million awarded to victims of work discrimination.
As well, we have this quote from Zurich Insurance that says companies need to be aware of the inherent risk of their board members and their personal assets. In addition to monetary compensation from targeted corporations, recent lawsuits have sought to replace board members, claw back their compensation, and revise incentive plans. That means that not only the organization is at risk when we're not applying a framework, company-wide framework, and EDI company-wide framework, but the board members are looking to replace some board members if they're not bringing results that are beneficial for the company. And many of these results had to do with the workforce, right? With the equity, diversity, and inclusion in the workforce. And if this is not happening, the risk is going to be major and it's going to increase every year, as we saw in the previous slide with the employment equity, equal employment. I lost the name of the organization. Equal Employment.
It's the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission.
So we're seeing this as it's trending up. It's not trending down. So the more years we take for organizations to realize that this is an inherent risk that they're putting their organization in, the more lawsuits and the more money it will be invested in paying these lawsuits.
That's right, Linda. And please tell us a little bit about what's happening in Canada, right? Because we've shared what is happening based on the US, and we see that the repercussions are definitely similar in Canada.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people think that Canada is not a litigation country, right, as the US, but that is changing. And it's not because, it's a trend or anything like that. It's because employees have felt this othering, this lack of, care for their well-being in organizations through the work of equity, diversity, and inclusion, or the lack of equity, diversity, and inclusion work in organizations. So in 2021, we'll see the Ontario Court confirm that contractual limitations on termination are unenforceable if the employee has been subject to harassment. So employees have been awarded increasingly significant aggravant and punitive damages. And in 2022, $1.5 million in punitive damages were awarded to an employee. So as we see, this is not staying just in the US. This is something that is in Canada as well. And we have seen as well the Indigenous community leading the way in bringing attention to lawsuits when their rights are not being recognized, right? And in 2021 as well, there was a class action lawsuit by Black Canadians working at the federal government for discrimination and racism within the public service of Canada. And we just learned that in 2023, the federal government of Canada has spent over $8 million fighting this lawsuit, and they have only invested $800,000 in actually mental health for their employees. So $8 million fighting a lawsuit, $800,000 investing in their employees. I think we can do the math here, is saying that it will have been cheaper and a better investment to spend those $8 million in putting processes in place, policies in place to protect their employees, their Black employees.
Absolutely, Linda. Absolutely. Thank you. And let's take a little bit of a look towards the concept of safety, right? Of workplace safety based on the ISO and based also on what is Canadian labor law. So the ISO 30415 standard promotes a psychologically safe system of work. And that system of work, that safety within the workplace in Canada, is protected by the National Standard of Canada on Psychological Health and Safety in the Workplace. So as we see here, right, it has many aspects, and tort law, for example, is where this standard can also be applicable. So the standard, as we know, does not exclude any of the laws, regulations, systems, right, that each region, territory, or country applies. It's actually a standard that can hold, for example, in this case, the National Standard of Canada on Psychological Health and Safety. Why? Because the standard as it is, the 30415 standard, really is a tree trunk, right? Where we can put all the acts, all the laws, and all the programs and structures of our current situation of the organization and hold it in a more strategic way and in a way that can be more sustainable. Something else that comes to mind is ESGs. And as Linda was mentioning in the previous slide, it's definitely a risk not to have an EDI structure. And it's also now being heavily promoted by ESGs. So I am going to just switch and share a little bit of a slide with you all on ESGs. And Linda, would you like to comment on the importance of ESGs and the ISO while I find the proper slides to show our participants?
Absolutely. As we know, more and more organizations have, not only in North America, but in Europe, they're being asked to share their ESG goals. And that is something that the ISO 30415 is an excellent framework to actually create this process to be able to, I don't know why I'm not speaking English today. I apologize. My mind is like all jumbled. But anyway, it helps an organization actually fulfill the ESG commitments and goals, and being able to report those back to either the government if it's something that is required, like it is in Europe, or their board of directors if they require that.
Exactly. Thank you, Linda. And we've been using, right, ESGs for over 60 years, right? And here in this slide, we see environmental, social governance. And in the social, we absolutely have, yes, human capital, which is not a term that we favor. So it's human talent, right? In terms of employee engagement, employee training and development, recruitment and retention. Well, these three areas, as a matter of fact, are heavily supported by the ISO standard in the guidelines, actions, and responsibilities that are to be applied in human resources. Specifically, those three categories plus others, because the ISO 30415 standard sees the human resource life cycle from beginning to completion, right? By completion, we mean either the moving around of talent within the organization or the cessation end of the particular work life cycle. And in the area of diversity and inclusion that we see on this slide, equal pay, gender representation, racial representation are also areas that the standard holds, as we were speaking before, through other regulations, through other equity acts, through other federal acts specifically put in place by Canada, and through, for example, the national standard for psychologically safe workplaces, also promoted by the federal government.
What we're trying to say over and over is that this standard brings accountability. That's one piece that is very important, especially for all of us working on equity, diversity, and inclusion. Accountability is key in order to move forward. And having roles and responsibilities, having KPIs, having a budget, that brings accountability and the democratization of risk and the responsibility of equity, diversity, and inclusion.
Absolutely. Thank you, Linda. I'm going to now share the screen to go towards the part of the Diversity and Inclusion Service Management certification that Ventura Collective, in partnership with Inclusion Score, offers to equity, diversity, and inclusion professionals here in Canada.
Before we move on to that, I would like to ask our audience if they have any questions regarding, we're moving to our second topic, that is the DISM certification of Diversity and Inclusion Service Management based on the ISO. This certification is professionals. And what we were talking previously is the actual standard, right? The Diversity and Inclusion 30415 standard, international standard, released in 2021. That standard is for organizations to be applied. So if you have any questions, I apologize. I have a glitch on my connection on LinkedIn. So I'm not sure if I'm seeing your questions. If for whatever reason we're not able to see your questions, please send us an inbox. We're going to share our information at the end of these presentations. So we will be happy to answer any of the questions that you might have. Thank you, Holly. I can see your comment there. So that means that it's working, it's back working. Yeah, I have a question from Barbara as well. It said, I have to jump to another meeting. Can I review the certification details on your website? Yes, you can. You can review all the details there, or you can go to the ISO as well. And we have a link on our website to have it. So I'm going to share our website here. And you can visit our website. We have some information about the standard, and from there you can jump directly to the ISO as well. If you would like to purchase the standard, it's available in French and in English, and everybody can purchase it.
Yes, thank you, Barbara. And also, Barbara, you can see the continuation of this presentation if you click on the link again. So this presentation is going to be recorded and available for everyone that registered either by LinkedIn and also YouTube. Gracias a ti, Barbara. Okay.
I don't see any more questions, so I think we can continue to our next topic.
Thank you, Linda. So what is a Diversity and Inclusion Service Management certification? For short DISM. It is a certification based on the ISO-30415 standard, and it is really a certification that promotes to EDI practitioners and professionals the tools necessary and the framework necessary to apply the standard 30415 in organizations more effectively. The way in which this certification introduces the standard is as a management framework, just like any other service is managed in an organization, right? So as accounting is managed, as legal, as information security, quality control, all that is a managed service. So the DISM methodology with the certification promotes that same view. And it also, as I was saying, provides the participants with the knowledge and skills to accompany an organization through the journey of developing a company-wide strategy based on the ISO 30415 standard, minimizing the risk, really, that we have been seeing in the beginning of our presentation, minimizing the risk of not having a proper EDI structure, and minimizing the risk of losing the talent that your organization absolutely needs to serve society and communities as is intended.
Before we move on to the next slide, Ana Maria, I would like to mention that it's important to distinguish both, right? Some people ask, like, I still don't understand what is the difference between the standard, the 30415 standard in diversity and inclusion, and the diversity and inclusion service management certification.
Yeah.
And just to reiterate, because we get that question a lot, is the standard, which was released by the International Standard Organization, ISO, is the standard that is available to anyone. Yes, as I mentioned, you can purchase it in their page. And this certification is for organizations. You can, if you complete all the steps that the standard saying, at the end of it, your organization could get a stamp saying like you are compliant with the ISO 30415. Your organization is moving in the right direction on equity, diversity, and inclusion. Now, the DISM is a methodology that was created by an organization that we partner with, that is the ISO 30415 DISM Forum and Inclusion Score. They created this methodology to make it more, I don't want to say easier, but to be more strategic in how to apply the ISO 30415 standard. So we give this training to professionals in EDI to learn how to apply this standard in organizations. So we certify individuals. So the DISM is for individuals, and the ISO 30415 standard is for organizations.
Okay. Thank you so much, Linda, for that clarification. It's absolutely necessary because yes, it's an important question to clarify. Thank you.
Okay, so and what is the structure of this course, of this certification? So it's a 6-week hybrid certification course. There's asynchronous learning, and there's weekly 90-minute live sessions featuring internationally recognized lecturers, and the discussions in those live sessions are amazing. We're about to launch our 3rd cohort in Canada, and the 2 previous cohorts were amazing. The conversations are rich. We learn in community through our asynchronous platform and during our live sessions. Our asynchronous learning happens through Mighty Networks, and the live sessions will take place via Zoom every Tuesday for 6 weeks from 12 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. EST, or 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. PST. This is the schedule of the course. These are the themes that we're going to talk about every week. And you can find the details of each week in our website. Once again, I'm going to put it here. If you go to our website, there's a little description of every week. And as I mentioned, we start September 3rd with our kickoff and overview of the program, and it will go another 6 weeks, finishing on October 16 with a case study and exam preparation.
Thank you, Linda. And the course requirements are previous knowledge of EDI, so either through an EDI certification or through experience working in the field, right? So as EDI committee member or grassroots organizations and others. The second is access to a computer with internet. The third is a commitment from the participant to cover asynchronous online learning and homework for about 2 to 4 hours per week. The fourth is also a commitment to join at least 4 of the 6 90-minute weekly live sessions. And really, as Linda mentioned earlier, it is a really fantastic, wonderful opportunity to learn in community, to strategize as professionals in a group setting, because this standard is relatively new, right? It was always only published in 2021. So we need as many ideas and as much support as we can from professionals in the field to support one another in the work. So the live sessions, as Linda said, are truly have been proved to be very fruitful in our learning experience, in our strategy, and just moving through this journey of not only promoting the standard, but actually supporting organizations in the application of the standard. And the last requirement is at the end to score a minimum of 75% for the final examination. In terms of investment, that's okay. I apologize too, because I have a little bit of a glitch on my internet connection today. And that's why I think there's a little bit of the delay. And especially at the beginning, I wasn't able to find the right pace for me to introduce myself at the beginning. So thanks and apologies if there's any delay. So in terms of the investment is 1,600 Canadian dollars plus tax per person. We do offer a group discount. So for 5 to 10 people, there will be a 25% off discount. And for 10 or more people, there is 37.5% discount. So we hope it's a good incentive for you to consider joining us. And most importantly, for individuals that belong to Equity Do communities, please reach out to us by email directly, because we do encourage individuals from Equity Do communities to speak to us, and hopefully we can, not hopefully, we will discuss potential avenues for support, for supporting your participation on this program. We don't want financial constraints to be a reason not to join us. And we do have a special promo for today's participants. So we are offering only today special pricing, so $300 off for the registration fee per person. So please, to access this promo, email us at certification@weareventura.com or reach out to us by LinkedIn. But definitely, we're trying to streamline our processes. So we would really appreciate if you could email your interest at certification@weareventura.com. We'll be really delighted to speaking with you. And
before we move on to that, Ana Maria, I have a question.
Yeah.
And before we move, I would like to hear if there's any other questions. Yeah. I have a question here by Holly Williams. Thank you for joining us, Holly. It says, how long is this certification valid for? Does it need to be renewed? So this certification is valid as long as there's no change in the standard, right? The standard 30415, it's a standard published by the ISO organization, And when there's a significant change to the standard, we probably will create an update certification. But the methodology of the DISM is what helps guide us professionals in the application of any standard, but specifically the equity, diversity, and inclusion. So we will probably create refresher courses, but once there's like a significant change in the standard.
That's a great question, Holly, and thanks, Linda, for answering. And as Linda was mentioning, it's really that the methodology is what holds the standard, and it will continue to hold the standard in its evolution, right? I mentioned earlier that we are part of the Standards Council of Canada, and we are actively now working with an international group to develop the technical standard, right, of this, of the 30415. So the DISM methodology will continue to be relevant to the application of the standard. It's only going to be, we are only going to have now more KPIs, more ways into measuring, right, the effectiveness of the standard, and to measure the applicability and how to sustain it. Thank you, Holly.
And as well, something that is very important to mention is that there's going to be, and we have our first one in October. It will be a forum of all DISM practitioners, and as well people interested in getting certified DISM, Diversity and Inclusion Service Management Professional. And through these forums, it will be an update, or what's new. Like, we are all coming together to the betterment of the methodology, to give our feedback to the ISO, as ourselves will take that feedback to our work group. So very important, becomes a community of people doing this work, and that we're constantly updating each other on what is the best way to apply equity, diversity, and inclusion. I invite you all to follow the DISM Forum on LinkedIn, even if you're not certified yet, because they have wonderful information of everything related to the ISO, litigation, new laws. Like, it's very informative, and a great way to keep learning about this even before you're certified. Okay, I don't see any more questions, so we can move to the next slide.
Wonderful.
Okay, so before we end, because this is the end of our presentation, we would like to let everybody know that the ISO, the work that we're doing with the ISO, we're not doing it in an isolated way. We're doing it as a movement, as a global movement. Currently, there's DISM certifications in the US, which was the original one, and Canada, as Ventura Collective is you're bringing it to Canada. In Latin America, we just launched, Ventura Collective launched the DISM in Latin America in May. So we're in our first cohort in Latin America. We're going to start our third cohort in Canada. We have another certification in South Africa. And in June, there's going to be an informational meeting about the certification in India. And actually, our colleague Neil Zen is working to launch this certification in India. And we invite you all to go to the informational meeting, or share it with your colleagues that reside in India, or companies that work in India, because the impact of this standard, it's incredible. This has the potential to be a revolution in how we are applying equity, diversity, and inclusion in organizations, to move them from, yes, good intentions, they're important, but really to make them a systemic change in a risk management. Not only a nice to have, all the good intentions, but how are we managing the risk that not having equity, diversity, and inclusion is having, in organizations.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you to our colleague Indranil, Neil Sen. I'm going to share with you all his LinkedIn profile. I hope that you all are seeing that comment in LinkedIn. Otherwise, I will make sure to add it later, and also the link to this particular event happening on June 15th.
I don't think they can see it. I don't see it showing here. But if you send it to me in the private chat, Ana Maria, I'll copy it and put it on LinkedIn.
Okay, great. Because I think when I'm pasting it, it goes to YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to share it with you over the private chat. That would be Indranil's LinkedIn profile.
There it is. Perfect. Well, thank you so much. If there's no questions left, we leave you with our information so you can reach out to us and contact us if you have any more questions regarding either the standard 30415, the Diversity and Inclusion Standard 30415, or if you have any questions regarding the DISM certification, Diversity and Inclusion Service Management Certification for EDI professionals. We thank you so much for your time and your patience with all our glitches today. That's what happens in live sessions. But please reach out to us if you have any more questions.
Thank you. Thank you for attending. Thank you, Linda.